The desert wind moved like a whisper across the high plains of northern Utah, carrying with it the scent of dust, sagebrush, and something that did not belong to this earth. It was late afternoon when Dr. Aria Valen arrived at the ranch gate, the sky washed in amber light that made the distant mesas shimmer as if the air itself was unstable. She stood before the weathered sign, Skinwalker Ranch faded letters carved into splintering wood, and felt an irrational sense of hesitation. For most scientists, places like this existed only in the footnotes of government reports dismissed as anomalies, pseudoscience, or rural superstition. But for Aria, this was the edge of the known universe, and she had come to measure its pulse. The hum started before she even entered the property, an obscure defense division. His eyes were tired but sharp. "Welcome to the anomaly," he said without smiling. "We've been waiting for someone who still believes that numbers can explain the unexplainable." They drove past open fields where nothing grew evenly, patches of grass fused with scorched soil, circles of glassy sand that looked melted. As they approached the central command trailer, the hum intensified. Inside, a cluster of monitors displayed real-time telemetry, electromagnetic readings, ground-penetrating radar, atmospheric ionization levels. But what caught Aria's attention was a continuous LiDAR scan looping on one screen. It showed a shape suspended above the property's central coordinates, a ring 31 feet in the air, perfectly symmetrical, with a void in its center. That, Elias said, pointing to the display, appeared 3 nights ago. No aircraft, no drone, no weather inversion. We recorded a gap in the data exactly when the anomaly formed. All sensors lost synchronization. Aria stared. A gap in time. Or in reality, he replied, "We're calling it the triangle event. The team believes it could be a localized space-time curvature, a natural wormhole, or a synthetic one." She wanted to laugh, but didn't. The data was too clean. "If it's synthetic," she said, "then someone built it, or something." At night, the desert became a sea of black. The stars stretched endlessly cold white fire over a silence so total it felt like pressure on the lungs. The team gathered by the launch pad, a simple concrete square where a rocket stood armed with telemetry and cameras. Their goal was simple: to stimulate the anomaly. Rocket 1 ignition in 5, 4, 3. The streak of light shot upward, a vertical lance against the night. But as it reached 150 feet, Aria's console blinked red. "Telemetry divergence," she whispered. On the main screen, the rocket's GPS path abruptly turned northeast, cutting through the air at impossible angles. The live camera showed it continuing straight up, but the data claimed it had twisted and dived toward the mesa. Elias slammed his fist on the table. That's exactly what happened last year. It's as if space itself rewrites the trajectory. The second launch went worse. The rocket's onboard sensors froze. Its coordinates mapped a spiraling descent into the desert floor. And yet, the physical rocket landed intact 2 miles away. By the third launch, Aria felt a subtle pressure in her skull, not pain, but a vibration, as though the air itself carried information. Her radio crackled with static, and through it she thought she heard voices. 2 distinct tones, overlapping rhythmic like a call and response. She looked at Elias. "You hear that?" He nodded slowly. "Signal interference," he said, "but not random. It's structured like communication." When the night was over, the data made no sense. The GPS paths formed geometric patterns, arcs, and spirals that matched nothing in flight dynamics. But when overlaid with magnetic anomalies recorded years earlier, the curves aligned perfectly with underground tunnels that had once been rumored beneath the ranch. The next day, they visited the Dry Gulch Creek, a shallow river at the southern border. Its banks were charred, in places trees blackened as if from heat without fire. Aria knelt to collect samples, her Geiger counter ticking softly. Something glimmered beneath the waterbone fragments, bleached white yet fresh. When she lifted them with forceps, she realized the edges were too clean, too uniform. "Animal?" she asked. Elias examined them. "Not unless animals now die by surgical precision. There's no decomposition here. Tissue soft color preserved. Whatever did this, it halted bacterial decay." Back at the lab, analysis revealed strange isotopic residues, an unknown ratio of carbon-14 decay inconsistent with the local environment, as though the tissue had spent centuries outside Earth's radiation exposure. Aria leaned back, her mind racing. Time dilation. "Or phase displacement," Elias said. "The body could have crossed a temporal field. Something around the triangle interferes with biological entropy." She looked at him. You mean it stopped time for flesh? That night, a storm rolled in over the mesas. Lightning pulsed horizontally across the horizon, illuminating the dark outlines of equipment towers. Arya stood under the awning, watching as one bolt split the sky, but it didn't vanish. Instead, it hung in the air, frozen mid-flash, a luminous thread suspended over the ranch for nearly 10 seconds before dissolving into mist. Her breath caught. She whispered to herself, "Space doesn't behave like this." Elias joined her eyes fixed on the lingering light. "We're inside a distortion zone," he said. "Every measurement we take collapses reality into a different version of itself." When the rain stopped, the desert steamed. Steam that shimmered with faint blue light. At dawn, they hiked toward the mesa to place new sensors. Beneath their boots, the ground trembled faintly, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. They reached a ridge where the sand was fused into glass. "Lightning?" she asked. Elias shook his head, too uniform, too circular. In the center of the glass disc lay a metallic shard, curved smooth and humming with residual charge. It looked manufactured, but no serial markings or material identifiers appeared under magnification. Its atomic lattice was non-crystalline, something between metal and plasma solidified. As she turned it in her hands, Arya felt heat, then cold, then nothing at all. For a moment, her reflection in the metal didn't match her movement. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't stare at it too long," he said quietly. "Last time one of us did, he saw something staring back." They took the sample back to the lab. Scanning electron microscopy revealed micro-patterns resembling quantum interference fringes, as though the object had existed in two locations simultaneously. Arya whispered, "If this isn't extraterrestrial, it's post-human." Elias didn't respond. He opened a separate folder, classified data, labeled Project Echo, showing earlier government attempts to measure localized gravitational inversions on the property. The final line in the report read, "Experiment terminated after biological casualties." "Why me?" she asked softly. "Why bring me into this?" Because he said, "You don't just measure data, you listen to it." Outside, the hum deepened. The monitors flickered, and for a second, all instruments froze. Then came a voice, faint, mechanical, but unmistakably human, broadcasting through every frequency. "You are not observing us. We are remembering you." The lights went out, and somewhere above the triangle, the void awakened. The morning after the voice in the radios, the air felt different, like the atmosphere had been polished. The sky above the triangle looked clean and empty, yet every instrument said it was crowded with things we could not see. We decided to drill not because we were sure of what we would find, but because the data from earlier scans drew the same invisible line through the ground again and again, like a hand tapping us on the shoulder and pointing down. We brought in a compact coring rig and parked it just west of the triangle. I checked the dosimeters, the magnetometers, the spectrum analyzer that could sniff out microwave energy, and a simple, stubborn analog voltmeter that didn't care for software. You learn to love simple tools in a place that lies to complex ones. "Slow feet," I told the drill operator. "If you feel the torque suddenly drop, stop immediately. That could mean we punched into a void." Elias lifted his eyes from a tablet. "We'll run high-speed cameras and keep the radar set to a shallow sweep. If anything passes overhead, even a thin sheet of ionized air, we should catch a reflection." I nodded and tried to slow my breathing. The hum was back low, almost musical, and I felt the old sensation behind my teeth, the faint taste of a coin pressed to the tongue. It was not panic. It was the ranch saying hello. The drill bit chewed through the first 9 meters like bread. Sedimentary layers came out in neat cylinders, wet and cold smelling of ancient riverbeds. At 12 meters, the sound changed, less grind, more hiss. We paused. The operator extended the core barrel and handed me the new segment. The top half was compacted sand and silt, the bottom half, nothing. A clean hole, as if someone had scooped the interior out with a spoon. "Void," I said, and Elias came closer without a word. I touched the edge with a gloved fingertip. The boundary between something and nothing was too sharp to be natural. "Leaston," Elias said. We fell quiet. There it was, a faint, regular clicking that did not come from the rig or the wind. It pulsed through the ground more than the air. I set a geophone next to the hole and watched the waveform dance in tight, even steps, tick, 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 not like an earthquake, more like a metronome. "Mechanical," I whispered. "Or biological," Elias said. "Or both." We kept drilling, following the click downward. At 14 meters, the voltmeter I had clipped to the rig's frame spiked to 1/2 volt, then 3/4. It made no sense there wasn't a power line for miles and the generator circuit was isolated. When I put my palm against the steel mast, my fingers prickled as if I'd brushed a fence. The operator cursed. "Pins and needles up my arm," he said, flexing his hand. "Everybody back 2 paces," I said, keeping my voice even. "This is static charge buildup or induced current from something below us. Either way, we don't touch metal without rubber gloves." We waited a full minute. The taste in my mouth grew stronger, and suddenly I knew why some people feel strong magnetic fields as a metallic tingle, because ions move differently across the nerves when the field is high enough. It's not a perfect explanation, but it's close, and close is all you get before the line between physics and folklore blurs. We took another core. This time the cylinder came out studded with tiny beads of glass like clear fish eggs trapped in rock. They clinked in my tray, humming faintly even after I set them down. Under a hand lens, they looked like frozen rain, but their surfaces bore microscopic ridges, concentric ripples, as if a wave had solidified in an instant. Rapid heating and quenching can do that, but the pattern was too regular, too engineered. What if the void isn't empty, I said. What if it's filled with a material that doesn't behave like a solid or a gas at this pressure? Elias leaned in, like a plasma turned to glass and then back to a field. Or a field that pretends to be glass when we look at it. He smiled at that, an exhausted smile that knew the irony of our work. In good science, pretend is a dangerous word. Here it was a daily visitor. We lowered a simple probe, a fiber optic scope with a soft white light and a thin cable that told us temperature and pressure. The camera slid into the hole. For a meter, it showed mud. Then silence. No mud on the lens, no light reflecting back, no particles drifting. The temperature dropped not up or down a degree, but in clean little steps, like descending a small staircase in the dark. Click 1 degree, colder, click another, then flat. The pressure reading lost its mind and returned with a number that had no units I recognized. Conversion error, or the probe had picked up a pressure that belonged to another place entirely. "Pull it back," Elias said, and when the image returned to brown mud, we all exhaled at once the way people do after they step across a chasm and realize the plank held. We were parsing the footage frame by frame when the radios hissed first a fog of static, then 2 tones alternating, like birds calling at dawn. It had structure symmetry, a rise and fall that repeated at a 1:1 ratio with the geophone clicks underground. I drew a quick sketch on my tablet, up, down, up, a mirror across a line. "That's not random," I said. "If you wanted to teach someone mathematics without words, you would send them symmetry. Start with a reflection, then move to a circle." The tone shifted. They broadened into a soft chord, not quite human, almost vowel-like. It rose until the hair on my arm stood straight. And then layered beneath it a voice that felt like it came from the inside of my skull rather than the air. Not English, but understandable in the way music is, sometimes understandable without translation, a meaning wrapped around sound. We all turned at once. Something hovered above the triangle. No, hovered is the wrong word. It wasn't holding itself up. It was simply there, and gravity didn't know what to do about it. At first, I thought it was a shimmer like heat over asphalt. Then the cameras caught it and gave the shimmer edges a central line pencil thin with 2 soft lobes on either side, as if a cylinder had unfurled half wings. It did not flap. It did not rotate. It simply refolded itself as if testing which way our angle of view would make the most sense. Record everything Elias said, though every device was already swallowing data like rain. The object brightened and dimmed without changing its outline. The radio tones continued their mirror dance. When the object moved, it didn't cross the air. It stepped across it like moving from one tile to the next on a floor that only it could see. Each step made the geophone click, and each click made my chest tighten a little, like the feeling before a thunderclap. I thought of the frozen lightning from the night before, and felt something like recognition, as if the ranch was telling one long story in different dialects of physics. "Can you hear us?" I asked before I knew I was speaking. It felt foolish, even as I said it, a child addressing a storm. The answer was not a word. It was a picture with sound in it. In my mind, or on the radios both, maybe I saw a ring above the ground perfectly round with a hole so dark it looked like an absence of thinking. The ring wasn't a machine or a door. It was a habit the world had taken on itself, a place where space preferred a shortcut. Through the ring, something watched not the way an eye watches, but the way a coastline watches, a wave not actively yet fully aware of every touch. I realized my hands were shaking. "If this is a wormhole," Elias said softly, "it's not just a tunnel in space. It's an arrangement of rules. and rules can be learned. I held up one of the glass beads. It sang at a frequency too high to hear, but my fingertips picked it up all the same. Then we should learn the alphabet, I said. Start with how the rules bend, not with why. We decided on a gentle test. No rockets, no blasts, just a kite, a carbon fiber frame with reflective tape, a line of thin copper, and a payload the size of a matchbox that held a tiny magnet, an accelerometer, and a quartz crystal for timekeeping. The idea was honest and simple. Fly the kite through where the ring liked to appear and watch time wobble if it did. Quartz crystals are stubborn about time. They vibrate, and with them your seconds and minutes do too. But if you make space relax or tense, the crystal will show it in a drift, no matter how tiny. The wind cooperated. The kite climbed the copper line, whistled softly, and the payload reported with the cheerful regularity of a heart monitor. As the kite crossed the coordinates the LiDAR had loved so much, the accelerometer stuttered just a tenth of a second, a blink inside a blink, and the quartz crystal lost one cycle and gained two it didn't own. It was small, so small we would have missed it if we hadn't been watching for exactly this kind of mischief. Time had hiccuped very gently. We brought the kite down. The object above the triangle folded itself a little tighter, as if curious. The tones in the radio changed again, no longer mirror, now spiral a sequence that approximated the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. Not the number itself, we weren't hearing digits, but a rhythm that felt like pi does when you walk around a pond and count your steps. Circles, I said, smiling despite myself. They like circles. The operator laughed softly, then swallowed it as if laughter were something fragile here. Elias watched the sky and then the ground the way a chess player watches both board and opponent's face. If they're teaching, he said, they're doing it the only way that makes sense to two species that don't share language, geometry, timing, response. I looked at the drill rig, the glass beads, the void at 14 meters, the frozen lightning, the melted sand disks, the way GPS lines drew arcs where rockets had flown straight. A pattern was forming, a patient one, not the pattern of a trap, but of a lesson plan. The voice returned softer, now less machine, more breath, though I knew that was probably my brain being generous. We did not get words, but we did get an intention repeat. Try again. Learn from the tiny drift in the quartz. Lower the probe slower. Listen to the clicks like a drummer listens for a tempo change. We stood in sunlight that felt newly minted, and as we prepared the next probe, I understood the fear that had kept teams before us cautious. If there's a door and someone or something on the other side knows you are there, you cannot be sure whether you are a guest or a specimen. But the tone of the lesson mattered, and every teacher I had loved had taught with patience. We lowered the second probe with a tether that could be cut instantly. The camera descended through mud to that crisp boundary where the dirt ended and the nothing began. I whispered to it as if it could hear me. Just a little further. The image went clear again. No particles, no glare. The thermometer stepped down once, twice, then leveled. The pressure reading, bless its stubbornness, returned with a value that refused to convert. The quartz crystal inside the probe drifted 3 cycles and then held steady as if a hand had steadied it. Then something leaned into the lens. Not an eye, not a face, a brightness shaped by curved rules. It was a curve within a curve, like the inside of a nautilus shell, where each chamber remembers the last and prepares for the next. For an instant, the camera's automatic focus found a pattern, fine hexagons nested inside each other like a honeycomb drawn by a mathematician who had fallen in love with spirals. And in that pattern, a pulse alternating mirror, then spiral, mirror, then spiral, a hello in 2 dialects. The feed went white, then black, then returned to mud. The geophone clicked 3 times. Overhead, the object took one last step across its invisible tiles and softened until even the cameras could not swear it had ever been there. We stood around the rig, not speaking. The wind turned, carrying a faint scent of rain. I looked at Elias, and for once, he didn't try to explain anything. He just nodded as if someone had answered a question he had been asking his entire life. "What now?" the operator said. Now, I said we do what they asked. We repeat, we make better questions, and we tell the truth about what we see, even if the truth is a shape without a name. That night, as the stars took their places and the hum faded to a memory, I sat outside the trailer with the glass bead on my palm. It was warm, then cool, then neither, and I realized what this place felt like to me. Not haunted, not cursed, curated. As if a library had been buried under the triangle, and the librarians did not always agree with each other, but had decided to keep the doors cracked for a few students willing to come after hours. I closed my hand around the bead, and made a quiet promise in the language that had brought me here: care for the data, care for the people, and respect the rules of a place that had its own rules. In return, perhaps the ranch would keep teaching us circles, mirrors, and spirals until the two tones in the radio and the two lobes in the sky drew together and made a new shape we could finally say out loud. Before I went to sleep, I checked the quartz timer on my wrist. It was 3 seconds ahead of the reference station 2 states away. I smiled at the ceiling, and for the first time since we had arrived, wasn't afraid of what might be looking back from the far side of the ring. The third night after the discovery of the void, something changed in the sky. The constellations above the ranch, Orion Cassiopeia, and the pale smear of the Milky Way looked subtly wrong. Their positions were a few arc minutes off, enough for a telescope to notice, but not for the naked eye. Aria was the first to point it out. "It's as if the stars have moved," she said, looking through the automated tracking system. "But they haven't. The movement isn't celestial, it's local. The air itself is bending the starlight." Elias watched the distortion on the screen. That means we're dealing with a gravitational lens. Not planetary, something small, dense, and temporary. Whatever's beneath the triangle is pulling light like a pocket of warped space. They decided to test it. Using 2 telescopes a kilometer apart, they aimed both at the same star field and measured the difference in angles. The data confirmed what no one wanted to believe: the light was being refracted through something invisible above the ground, not in the sky. "Imagine space as a flexible sheet," Aria explained, trying to keep it simple for the recording logs. "If you press your finger into the sheet, light curves around the dent. Now imagine the dent isn't made by mass, but by energy itself. That's what we're seeing." They spent hours collecting spectra. The air shimmered with faint ultraviolet emissions cycling every 11 minutes. The wavelength didn't match any natural ionization process known on Earth. It was as if molecules were being excited by a rhythm, one that pulsed in harmony with the same tones they had heard on the radio. When the next pulse came, it wasn't sound, but vibration. The ground hummed like a tuning fork. The void beneath the drill site started glowing faintly blue like the edge of a welding arc. Elias whispered, "It's responding." The cameras captured filaments of light rising from the hole, thin threads, like smoke twisting into complex geometries that looked alive. The patterns matched mathematical constants: Fibonacci spirals, logarithmic arcs, perfect ratios of 1 to 5. Aria stepped closer, her voice barely a breath. "They're not random. They're showing us structure, maybe language." Then from the depths of the void, a sphere emerged, small, metallic, and perfectly smooth. It hovered motionless, then emitted a tone that matched the earlier radio pattern. Around it, the air folded like ripples in water, distorting everything behind it. "Magnetic field's off the charts," Elias muttered, scanning the readings. "It's generating its own localized gravity well. Aria, that's..." A probe, she finished. Or an eye. The sphere projected a beam onto the sand, forming a grid of light symbols, shifting glyphs that rearranged themselves faster than they could interpret. The geometry wasn't arbitrary. It was recursive, every symbol containing smaller versions of itself, like DNA for mathematics. Aria felt something inside her mind respond, not words, but recognition. The symbols pulsed in patterns that matched the frequencies of human alpha brainwaves. "It's syncing to us," she said quietly. "It's reading neural rhythms." Then she saw a flash of images, not on the screen, but directly inside her perception. A planet with twin suns, oceans, the color of Mercury towers grown from crystalline structures that refracted light into rainbows. And then darkness, a void swallowing the towers whole. When she gasped, Elias caught her arm. "What did you see?" "Another world," she said. "But it's gone, like a memory projected into our minds." The sphere pulsed once more and retreated slowly into the hole, leaving behind a faint metallic residue. When Aria touched it, her instruments went haywire. The residue was superconductive at room temperature, rejecting every magnetic field as if it existed half outside the laws of matter. That night, they analyzed the residue under the electron microscope. The atomic lattice rotated on its own, adjusting orientation in response to electromagnetic input as though it were alive. Each shift emitted faint neutrino, burst something no earthly material should do. Elias, Aria said, staring at the display, "If neutrinos are leaking from it, that means it's connected to a quantum field beyond ours. Maybe that's how they travel." "You think we just talked to them?" "No," she replied. "I think we just intercepted a message they left for whoever figured out the math." At dawn, the ranch was silent again. The stars had returned to their proper places, but the instruments kept ticking subtle oscillations that hinted the gate hadn't closed completely. Later that day, while calibrating the magnetometers, Aria noticed something impossible. The compass needles weren't pointing north anymore, they were pointing down. She turned to Elias. If the magnetic field is shifting vertically, he finished the thought. Then the center of gravity is below us, deep below, maybe miles down. They decided to send a deep signal, an ultra-low frequency pulse, similar to those used to communicate with submarines. The frequency was chosen for a reason. It penetrates rock water and even metallic barriers. They broadcast 3 pulses and waited. For a long time, there was nothing. Then the Earth answered not metaphorically, but literally. A return pulse came back delayed by 4.6 seconds. That delay corresponded to a depth of nearly 9 kilometers. Elias went pale. Something down there hurt us. Aria's voice trembled and answered. That night, the triangle glowed again. The air thickened, stars rippling like they were underwater. The hum deepened until it felt like a heartbeat beneath their feet. For the first time, Aria didn't feel fear, she felt awe. The universe wasn't silent, it was whispering. And she was finally learning its alphabet. The pulse that answered from 9 kilometers below the ranch kept repeating through the night. Every 4.6 seconds, the seismographs ticked. The rhythm was too precise for geology, too patient for human machinery. It was as if the planet itself was keeping time with something that lived inside it. By dawn, the team's camp had become a miniature observatory. Portable antennas stood among the sagebrush cables, ran like veins across the sand, and every screen glowed with numbers no one fully understood. Aria sat outside with a mug of coffee that had gone cold hours earlier. It feels alive, she said. The signal, I mean. Like it's breathing under us. Elias joined her, his face lined by exhaustion, but bright with curiosity. If it's alive, it's enormous, he said. 9 kilometers down, that's deeper than any human structure. The amplitude suggests an object the size of a mountain, maybe more. Aria looked toward the triangle, where faint heat haze shimmered even in the morning chill. A mountain that moves. They began analyzing the return pulses. Each wave carried subtle variations, tiny modulations that weren't random. When translated into visual patterns, the frequencies formed spirals and branching shapes that resembled neuron pathways or galactic arms. It's like a cosmic fingerprint, Aria said. Every pulse carries information, maybe coordinates, maybe equations. Elias overlaid the waveforms on a map of the local magnetic field. To their shock, the lines aligned with a pattern that extended far beyond the ranch, stretching across Utah, Arizona, and into Nevada, forming a massive geometric shape, a hexagon inscribed in the landscape itself. This can't be coincidence, Elias murmured. The ancient Anasazi ruins. Some of them sit exactly on these vertices. Aria's pulse quickened. You think they built their settlements according to this geometry? Or maybe they found the geometry already there, he replied. Maybe they were trying to understand it same as we are. That afternoon, a storm rolled in from the northwest. Thick clouds gathered fast, circling the ranch like a whirlpool in the sky. The barometers dropped so sharply that ears popped. Lightning flashed, but again, the bolts didn't strike. They hung frozen midair like luminous threads. The instruments went blind. Every camera turned white with static. Every radio went silent except one. From the oldest analog receiver, a voice emerged. It wasn't synthetic, but it wasn't human either. It spoke with rhythm-like speech, slowed 1,000 times each syllable, stretched until it became almost music. Aria leaned closer. Record this. The voice rose and fell in long harmonic waves. Then came short bursts, patterns of 3, then 7, then 13. Prime numbers. It's counting, she whispered. Prime numbers mean intelligence. When the signal ended, every light flickered back on. The computers displayed new data without command lines of coordinates and timescales calculated to the millisecond. At first glance, it looked like random noise. But Aria realized the coordinates pointed upward, far upward into space. Elias cross-referenced them with NASA's star catalogs. The coordinates matched no known star, but pointed toward a region of deep space near Cygnus, a place astronomers called the Dark Rift, where light from distant galaxies was blocked by dense interstellar dust. It's not just below us, Aria said softly. It's connected to something out there, a resonance between the Earth's crust and that region in the sky. Elias's mind was already racing. What if the energy field here isn't a natural phenomenon? What if it's a relay, a node in a network that spans light years, a communications bridge between 2 points in space-time? Aria stared into the storm. Then this isn't a mystery, it's infrastructure. That night she dreamed of stars falling like rain. She was standing on the ranch, but above her the sky was alive, filaments of light weaving in colossal loops, each one humming with purpose. The sound was the same rhythm as the pulse below her feet. When she awoke, she was still hearing it, only now it wasn't a dream. The frequency was real, picked up by the low-frequency sensors as a standing wave oscillating between the Earth and the ionosphere. It was as if the planet had become a drum and something beyond it was playing the beat. They launched a weather balloon equipped with a spectrometer, hoping to capture whatever radiation caused the resonance. The balloon rose through the clouds and sent back unexpected readings, a spectrum dominated by frequencies between 1,420 megahertzes, the natural emission line of hydrogen, and 1,421 megahertzes. That's the hydrogen line, Elias said, eyes wide. The universal marker used by scientists to search for extraterrestrial signals. Aria whispered, "That's not coincidence. They're using the most common element in the universe to talk to us." As the balloon reached the edge of the stratosphere, its camera captured a strange image, a faint ring of blue light hovering high above the ranch, almost invisible to the naked eye. It was vast, tens of kilometers wide and perfectly circular. "It's a mirror," Elias murmured. "An atmospheric lens, they're bending radio waves through it." Aria realized something profound. They're not coming to us. They're already here. The planet is part of their machine. That evening, the desert glowed faintly under a crescent moon. The hum returned deeper and more rhythmic than ever before. Aria held one of the glass beads in her palm. It vibrated softly like a heartbeat trying to sync with her own. And then for a fraction of a second, the world shifted. The mesas flickered, the stars smeared into streaks of light, and she saw a different sky, one with twin suns and a vast silver sea stretching to infinity. When the vision faded, Elias was shouting her name. She blinked, the bead still pulsing in her hand. "What did you see?" he asked. "Another Earth," she said quietly. "But older, wiser, waiting." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The hum faded into silence, and the desert seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere below 9 kilometers down, the pulse began again, steady, deliberate, like a signal waiting for its reply. By the fifth night, sleep had become impossible. The team took turns watching the monitors, not because they feared an attack, but because no one wanted to miss what the Earth might say next. The pulse from the deep layers had changed faster now, almost like a heartbeat under strain. Aria stared at the seismic readouts. "It's accelerating," she murmured. 9 kilometers down, something is waking up or charging up. Elias sat beside her, rubbing his temples. "Maybe not charging," he said. "Maybe communicating. Look, each burst corresponds to the rotation of the Earth. It's synchronizing with planetary motion." He overlaid the data onto a global map. What appeared on the screen made Aria and this ranch could be the central node. The idea sounded impossible, yet the data refused to argue. When they transmitted another low-frequency pulse, the echoes returned not only from beneath the ranch, but from the other nodes around the world, as if the entire planet had briefly turned into a mirror. For a moment, every magnetometer in the control room spiked. The digital clocks blinked out, then returned 1 second earlier than before. "Time drift," Aria whispered. "We lost a second." Or maybe she thought we didn't lose it, it just went somewhere else. The next day, the hum in the air became almost melodic. Even birds seemed to mimic its rhythm. The wind no longer blew randomly. It circled the ranch in spirals as if drawn by invisible lines of force. Elias's instruments picked up a faint gamma ray burst, not from space, but from beneath the ground. Gamma rays, the signature of nuclear decay and cosmic collisions, should not exist inside the crust. "That's impossible," he muttered, "unless the void below us is looked up." For a moment, she could swear she saw faint arcs connecting the stars, thin threads of light tracing invisible bridges across the sky. "Elias," she called. "Softly, they're mapping it for us." Through the telescope, they saw something that defied every law of optics. Between the stars, small dark shapes moved. Not meteors, not satellites, but perfect triangles gliding silently against the black. They didn't block the stars, they bent them the way light bends through glass. Gravitational lensing, Elias breathed. Those aren't ships, they're distortions. Objects massive enough to bend space-time but thin as light itself. "Then they're not visitors," Aria said. "They're architects." At 3:14 a.m., all systems froze. The coordinates pointed toward a region 1400 light-years away near a red dwarf system cataloged only once in NASA's deep field scans. No planets had ever been observed there, until now. The screen showed something faint, a ring of metallic light orbiting an invisible center. It wasn't a planet, it was a structure. By God, Elias whispered. That's an artificial megastructure, a Dyson shell. Aria's heart pounded. So that's what this is, a power relay between Earth and that system. They stared at the data in silence. It was too big to comprehend an ancient energy web stretching across space with Earth as one of its forgotten anchors. Suddenly, the speakers came alive with the same harmonic tones they'd heard before, but this time layered with something new. Beneath the tones, a whisper. Not English, not any human language, but with rhythm and syntax, too deliberate to be random. Can you isolate it? Aria asked. Elias worked quickly, applying filters. The voice emerged clear, melodic, and low, each syllable resonating like a chord. A simple message repeated over and over, do not repair what you do not understand. The words sent a chill through them both. Repair, Aria said. They think we're trying to fix it. Elias nodded slowly, or worse, to reactivate it. Before they could speak again, the lights dimmed. The air grew heavy, charged with static. The ground trembled once, twice, and then a column of light erupted from the triangle, rising hundreds of meters into the sky. Inside the column, particles spun like dust in sunlight, but each one shimmered with its own orbit. Aria lifted her hand toward it. The light felt neither hot nor cold, just aware. And then she heard it not with her ears, but directly in her mind, a sequence of images, galaxies forming civilizations, rising and then collapsing into silence. And in the center of it all, the same triangular symbol repeating like a signature. When it ended, she was crying. They built it to speak across the stars, she said. But something happened. Something destroyed them. The signal we're hearing, it's an echo of a civilization trying to warn whoever comes next. Elias stood beside her, watching the light fade. Then maybe we're not the first to find this place, he said. Just the first to survive long enough to understand it. The hum subsided, the instruments quieted. Above them, the stars looked normal again, but to Aria, they no longer felt distant. They felt connected. The universe wasn't empty. It was full of messages written in light, gravity, and time, waiting for minds brave or foolish enough to listen. And somewhere deep below Skinwalker Ranch, the pulse beat once more, slower now, almost like a sigh, as if the Earth itself was dreaming of the stars. By the next sunrise, everything felt unreal. The desert wind carried a faint metallic scent, and the sand around the triangle glowed dimly as if it remembered the light from the night before. Aria hadn't slept at all. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw fragments of the vision again, the twin suns, the dying cities, and the endless ring of light that wrapped around a star like a cage. Elias found her outside sketching those shapes in the dirt with a stick. You're trying to remember the geometry, he said quietly. It's more than geometry, she replied. It's language. They didn't write with words, they wrote with physics. Every pattern meant a concept, mass, time, memory. I think the triangles mean connection between realities. He knelt beside her. Between universes? Maybe, she said. Or between layers of one universe we can't fully see. Inside the command tent, the computers continued logging data on their own. The magnetometers recorded rhythmic pulses that formed perfect sine waves. The frequency wasn't random, it matched the Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic heartbeat of Earth. They're sinking to the planet's field again, Elias said. Or maybe they always were. That morning, Aria suggested something daring to send a new signal, but not just a frequency. She wanted to encode the mathematical constant pi into the hydrogen line they had discovered using their strongest transmitter. If they're still listening, it was a clean, simple sequence, prime numbers, followed by pi to 20 digits. For a long time, nothing happened. The wind whispered through the canyons, and the hum beneath their feet returned to its slow rhythm. Then, at exactly 1421, the frequency of hydrogen, the entire array of instruments went dark for 2 seconds. When they came back online, the signal they had sent was being played back to them, perfectly mirrored. It's an echo, Elias said. No, Aria whispered. It's a reply. On one of the screens, a pattern began to form a three-dimensional waveform, twisting on itself like a spiral galaxy. The data was impossibly dense, layers upon layers of encoded light and sound. When Aria ran a spectral analysis, she froze. This isn't just data, she said. It's an image. They decoded it into a visual projection, a massive structure floating in space, a sphere wrapped in thousands of luminous rings, each orbiting in mathematical harmony. Around it were smaller satellites arranged in a fractal pattern. The rings emitted energy signatures consistent with anti-gravity propulsion and plasma confinement. Elias spoke in a whisper. It's an artificial star system. A Dyson construct, Arya said, but not like any we imagined. This one isn't harvesting energy, it's containing it. As they studied the image, they noticed something else. In the core of the structure was a dark void, the same black hole-like center they had seen in the ranch's LiDAR scans. It's identical, Elias said. They built the same geometry here on Earth, a smaller version of whatever that is. Arya felt her pulse quicken. Maybe Earth isn't just part of the network. Maybe it's the key. For the rest of the day, they examined every frame of the transmission. One section showed complex atomic diagrams, hydrogen, helium, and something else, entirely an element that didn't exist on the periodic table. Its nucleus appeared to vibrate between two energy states as if it existed partly outside our luminous vines. They extended high into the air, forming a faint lattice that disappeared into the clouds. Is that plasma? Elias asked. No, Arya said. It's structured light. Coherent photons, the same kind used in optical communication systems. They're forming a data channel. As they watched, the lattice pulsed once, and the night sky answered. A column of bluish light descended from above, slow, deliberate, and silent. The air around it vibrated so intensely that their voices failed. When the light touched the ground, it didn't burn. Instead, it folded open like a curtain being drawn aside. Behind it stood a shape that defied comparison, tall, thin, woven from light itself. No eyes, no mouth, no flesh, just geometry in motion, shifting and breathing. Arya's first thought wasn't fear, it was recognition. The same pattern she had seen in her visions, the same structure that built the Dyson sphere. It spoke without sound. The words came as direct impressions, simple and clear. We were born from stars. You were born from us. Arya trembled. Who are you? She whispered aloud. Observers, the voice replied. Architects of balance. This planet was one of our instruments. It has forgotten its purpose. Elias found his voice. The network. The signals. What do they do? The being's light rippled. They hold reality together. But one node is broken. You are standing on it. Arya's throat went dry. Can it be fixed? Yes, came the answer, but not by force, by understanding. And then, like a fading aurora, the figure dissolved back into light. The lattice in the sky flickered once and vanished. The night fell silent again. For a long time, Arya stood motionless, staring at the spot where the being had stood. She finally turned to Elias. They didn't come to invade us, she said softly. They came to remind us. Elias nodded slowly, his face pale in the starlight. That we're part of something much bigger, and we've broken it. The hum returned deep and low, as if the earth itself had heard their conversation. And far above them, one star in the constellation Cygnus flickered twice a signal so faint that no human telescope would notice yet. For Arya, it felt like a heartbeat echoing through infinity. The universe was alive, and it had just spoken back. By the time the sun rose again, the air around the ranch felt charged, not in a metaphorical sense, but literally. The static crackled on every metal surface. The sand stuck to their boots like magnetized dust. Even the sky had changed. It was bluer than it should have been, almost metallic, as if sunlight were refracting through an invisible filter. Arya couldn't stop thinking about the words from the being of light. This planet was one of our instruments. It has forgotten its purpose. What kind of civilization could speak like that, not in conquest, but in quiet disappointment? Elias was already buried in data. The frequency from the void has shifted again, he said. It's modulating into the radio spectrum, somewhere around 1.618 gigahertz. Arya looked up. The golden ratio. He nodded grimly. Exactly. Even nature uses that constant, the pattern of galaxies, shells, hurricanes, even DNA spirals. Whatever's sending this knows how the universe writes beauty into math. The signal repeated every 7 minutes. Each pulse carried an energy spike, a perfect wave that never decayed. It shouldn't have been possible. It's not losing power, Elias whispered. It's drawing energy from space itself. Arya stared at the readings. 0 point energy. They're tapping into the quantum vacuum, the background field that exists everywhere. The whole universe is their power grid. By nightfall, the entire ranch was vibrating like a living organism. The soil emitted faint bioluminescent light, glowing blue in the dark. When Arya brushed her hand through the dirt, the glow followed her movements like static dust responding to her touch. "This isn't just mineral reaction," she murmured. "It's data information encoded into matter." She picked up a handful of glowing sand and whispered to Elias, "What if they left this planet seeded with a memory system, one that could reactivate when humanity reached a certain level of understanding?" Elias's eyes widened. "You're saying the Earth itself might be a biological archive like a cosmic hard drive?" That night, a low tremor shook the mesa. Not violent, rhythmic, deliberate, Arya ran outside. From the center of the triangle, a soft column of light rose once again, but this time, it didn't go up. It curved sideways, bending toward the horizon like liquid glass. "It's connecting," Elias shouted, pointing to the radar. "That light, it's creating a wormhole signature, but it's horizontal anchored within the crust." Arya stared into the phenomenon. The light shimmered, folding space like rippling water. For a moment, she saw through it, not to another place on Earth, but to somewhere impossible, a massive structure beneath an alien sky, its towers pulsing with the same blue energy that hummed beneath her feet. "Elias," she whispered, "it's not just below us, it's beneath reality itself." The shimmer expanded and sound began to bleed through low tones, not like machinery, but like voices chanting from a great distance. Elias amplified the audio feed. The words, if they were words, formed patterns that matched mathematical constants, Fibonacci sequences, fractal rhythms, perfect harmonics. "It's a message made of mathematics," Arya said softly. "They're trying to teach us through the laws of the universe." Suddenly, the light pulsed 3 times and something stepped through. At first, it looked like a distortion, a vertical blur in the air, and then it began to take shape. The figure was tall, humanoid, but composed of faintly luminous particles, almost transparent. When it moved, reality bent slightly around it, as though it carried its own gravity. Arya and Elias froze. The being turned its head slowly toward them. Its face, if it had one, was smooth, featureless, but its form flickered with patterns, galaxies, star clusters, nebula forming and collapsing across its surface like living tattoos. Arya could feel it thinking. In her mind, words appeared not spoken, but transmitted clear, simple, ancient. "You are fragments of us. We are the architects who planted light in matter." Elias whispered under his breath, "You're saying life didn't evolve here by chance." "Nothing in this universe is by chance," the being replied. "The cosmos is a song of probability guided by memory. You call it physics, we call it continuity." Arya trembled. "Why now? Why reveal yourselves after so long?" "Because your world is changing the frequency of its song," it said. "Your machines have begun to mimic the patterns that awaken the lattice. You are close to rediscovering what you lost." Elias frowned. "The lattice? You mean the energy grid we found?" The being's light brightened. "Yes, a web that binds all inhabited worlds. A safeguard created eons ago to keep the universe stable. One node fell silent, this one. Your planet drifted out of harmony. But the system has heard your signal. The network stirs again." The air trembled with resonance. Monitors inside the command tent came alive on their own, displaying hundreds of waveforms, signals not just from Utah, but from across the globe. "The grid is reactivating," Elias said in disbelief. "Every node on Earth, Stonehenge, Giza, Machu Picchu, they're all responding to the same frequency." The being's form flickered like candlelight in wind. "Balance must return, but you must not interfere with the process. The Earth will remember what it is." "What does that mean?" Arya asked. The being extended its hand, or rather a stream of luminous particles shaped like one. When its light touched the ground, the soil rearranged itself into a perfect spiral identical to the ones carved into ancient stones around the world. "This pattern exists in your DNA and your galaxies in the smallest atom," it said. "It is the signature of creation. When a civilization understands the spiral, it is ready to join the continuum." Then slowly the being began to fade, its voice softening into vibration. "Do not fear the awakening. You were never alone. You were never separate. The universe only forgot your name for a while." The light folded inward, collapsing back into the void. The air fell silent. Arya dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Elias, They didn't just visit us, they made us. He placed a hand on her shoulder. No, he said quietly, they remembered us. The sky above the ranch shimmered faintly one last time, and the hum beneath the ground slowed to a steady, peaceful rhythm, the heartbeat of a planet that was no longer sleeping. And for the first time since the investigation began, the silence felt alive. Somewhere deep beneath the earth, the grid pulsed once a signal that rippled through stone, ocean, and air, a cosmic whisper spreading across the stars. The forgotten world has awakened. That night, the stars over the ranch looked alive. They flickered in strange rhythms, almost as if they were answering one another. Aria sat alone outside the command tent, watching constellations rearrange themselves ever so slightly. Orion's belt shifting by fractions of a degree, Cassiopeia glowing brighter along its edges. It was subtle, but she could feel it in her chest. The universe wasn't static anymore. It was breathing. Elias joined her quietly, holding 2 mugs of coffee that neither of them really needed. It's strange, he said. I used to think of space as empty, endless darkness filled with nothing. Now it feels crowded, like it's full of eyes. Aria smiled faintly. Maybe it's always been watching. Maybe we just learned how to notice. Inside the tent, the equipment was still humming. The magnetometers, the seismographs, even the tiny quartz clocks were moving in sync, beating to the same cosmic pulse. It was like the entire ranch ground. Maybe that's how they communicate, by tuning minds to the same wavelength. Elias looked out into the desert thoughtful, and maybe that's what they meant by balance. Not domination, not faith, just harmony. The words hung in the air for a while, fragile and infinite. Then the instruments began to spike again. The magnetic field surrounding the ranch suddenly rose 10, 20, 30 times normal levels. The sky shifted from deep black to a soft blue glow. The stars blurred like light seen through rippling water. Elias ran inside to check the monitors. It's happening again, he said. But it's not a flare. It's a portal. Aria stepped closer to the window. The triangle was no longer just a circle of scorched sand. It was a doorway. The air above it shimmered with energy curving inward like a lens focusing light. Get the cameras, she whispered. As they filmed, the shimmer deepened, folding into itself until it became a tunnel of light reaching into the earth. Inside, faint shapes moved slow, graceful, almost liquid. Elias swallowed hard. Are those it, she said finally. They're from another layer of reality. Parallel matter, same space, different vibration. Elias stared at her. You're saying they coexist with us, but we just can't see them. Exactly, she replied. Until now. One of the beings drifted closer to the edge of the portal. Its movement was fluid like water following a magnetic current. When it reached the boundary, the air around Aria tingled. Every hair on her arms stood upright. She could feel its awareness brushing against hers, gentle, curious, ancient. Then, without warning, the creature's light expanded, projecting an image into the night sky. Not a hologram, not a reflection, more like a memory. Mountains floated in midair. Oceans turned to glass. Above them, rings of light encircled a crimson sunday, and around that sun hung vast geometric structures, perfect spheres, linked by glowing bridges orbiting in mathematical precision. Aria whispered, it's their home. The image shifted. Now she saw Earth, but not as it was now. It was younger, greener, with colossal towers rising from the oceans, shimmering with the same blue energy that hummed beneath the ranch. Elias gasped. They were here millions of years ago. Aria nodded slowly. Maybe we didn't evolve by accident. Maybe they shaped life here like gardeners planting a seed. The being's light pulsed, and another image appeared, a planet torn apart by its own machines, its sky burning red. She understood without words. That was what had happened to them. They had built too much too fast until their creation devoured its own world. The message was clear. We made the same mistake once. Don't repeat it. As the vision faded, Aria felt something new inside her mind. Not a voice, but a pattern, a feeling. The creature wasn't just showing her images. It was teaching her to think differently, to feel space and energy as one continuous field. When the light dimmed, the beings retreated back into the portal. The shimmer folded inward again and vanished. Silence returned. Elias sat down hard on the sand, his face pale. We just witnessed first contact, and it wasn't invasion. It was instruction. Aria looked at the stars again. They're not gods. They're scientists, explorers like us. But older, wiser. She turned to him. We have to tell the world. Elias hesitated. "Do you think anyone will believe us?" She smiled sadly. "It doesn't matter. The proof is here, and it's in the data." Aria, it wasn't just a coincidence. It was an answer. They weren't alone. They never had been. The following morning, the air above the ranch felt heavier, like the atmosphere itself had thickened. The birds were silent, and even the wind seemed hesitant to cross the fields. The energy that had lingered in the soil was still there, but calmer, now more like a heartbeat than a tremor. Aria walked to the center of the triangle, her boots sinking slightly into the scorched sand. The surface still glowed faintly, as if it remembered every photon that had touched it. When she crouched down and placed her hand flat against the ground, a soft vibration passed through her palm. It wasn't random. It was rhythmic, deliberate, almost musical. Elias came up behind her carrying a portable spectrometer. "The frequency's stabilizing," he said. "It's humming at 528 hertz, the so-called DNA repair frequency some biologists joke about. But this is no joke. It's resonating through the entire area." Aria smiled faintly. "That's the frequency of harmony and molecular vibrations. It's almost as if the Earth is healing itself." Elias adjusted the device, or being healed. When they returned to the lab, the sensors had recorded something new. A faint electromagnetic pulse had emanated from beneath the mesa, traveling outward across the globe. The signal repeated every 4 hours, its amplitude rising slightly each time. But what caught Aria's attention was its harmonic signature. It matched the resonance of the hydrogen line used by astronomers to communicate across the galaxy. Its broad could hear this. They stared at the monitors in silence as the realization sank in. The Earth was no longer silent in the cosmic void. It was singing. That night, the stars above Utah grew brighter, shimmering with unusual intensity. The Milky Way arched across the sky like a silver river, and at its heart a faint blue flicker. At first, Aria thought it was a plane, then a satellite, but it didn't move. It pulsed once, twice, then again matching the rhythm of the planetary hum. "Elias," she said softly, "something's answering." Within minutes, the signal appeared on their receivers, an identical frequency but inverted. It wasn't just copying Earth's hum, it was harmonizing with it. "They've heard us." Elias said, his voice almost reverent. The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. The response signal contained patterns, binary sequences nested within golden ratio intervals. When Aria translated the first sequence, it formed a simple spiral diagram identical to the ones carved into ancient sites around the world. The message was unmistakable: connection achieved. But connection to what? They decided to triangulate the signal source using deep space telescopes. The coordinates pointed back toward the same region near Cygnus, the one that had appeared in Aria's vision. Only now something new was visible there, a faint ring of light expanding like a ripple in the fabric of space. Elias leaned forward. "That's not a star. That's an event." As they watched the ring widen, bending starlight around it, space itself seemed to twist. And from within that distortion, something began to emerge, a shape vast beyond comprehension. At first, it looked like a sphere. Then it elongated, fracturing into smaller symmetrical forms connected by luminous bridges. It was a structure, not a planet, a lattice of colossal energy conduits suspended in the void. Aria whispered, "It's the Dyson construct, the same one from the transmission." Elias nodded, "And it's activating." Every telescope on Earth, those pointed at Cygnus, those scanning cosmic radiation, even military satellites began reporting the same anomaly, a synchronized energy spike that defied all known astrophysical models. Light from nearby stars bent sharply toward the structure, as though gravity itself were being redirected. "The entire thing's functioning as a gravitational lens," Elias said. "They're bending light to open something, a corridor maybe." Aria's voice trembled, a bridge between their world and ours. As they watched, a narrow column of energy shot out from the center of the structure straight toward Earth. It wasn't destructive. It was precise, calculated like a beam of focused intention. The beam split into multiple threads, each aligning perfectly with one of the ancient geometric nodes across the planet: Giza Stonehenge, the Nazca Lines, Easter Island. "They're reawakening the grid," Aria said. "It's not a myth, it's a planetary network. The ancients didn't build them for ceremony, they built them for resonance." Elias shook his head in disbelief. "You mean these sites have been waiting for this signal for thousands of years?" "Yes," she said quietly, "and we just turned the key." Hours later, the first global effects began to appear. Magnetic compasses wavered. Aurora lights danced across skies where they had never been seen before, over the equator, above deserts, even across oceans. People across the world reported hearing low melodic vibrations, some in dreams, others while awake. News stations scrambled for explanations, but no one could provide one. Power grids fluctuated not from overload, but from resonance interference. It was as if human technology was being gently tuned by something larger. Aria and Elias watched from the ranch as the aurora shimmered overhead, painting the desert in rippling curtains of blue and gold. "This isn't chaos," Aria said softly. "It's calibration." Elias nodded. "They're aligning us to the cosmic frequency." And then came the vision. The light above the ranch coalesced again, but this time it didn't form a being. It formed a map, a three-dimensional projection of the galaxy. Thousands of glowing points connected by threads of light, each thread pulsing with data. In the center was Earth shining brighter than the rest. A voice filled the air, not in words, but as a collective thought, vast and compassionate. "The lattice is restored. The forgotten song continues. The universe remembers itself through you." Aria closed her eyes, tears on her face. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Elias smiled faintly. "It's terrifying." The vision faded and the aurora dimmed. The world below was quiet again, but it was not the same world. The magnetic field had subtly changed. Clocks ticked a fraction slower. Even gravity itself measured a hair weaker than before. Aria looked up at the sky one last time. The blue flicker near Cygnus was gone, but she could still feel its presence, a soft echo in the back of her mind, a vibration that felt like home. "They didn't come to conquer," she said quietly. "They came to remind us who we are." Elias exhaled. "Children of the stars." She nodded. "And now maybe we finally started to grow up." Far above them, in the cold silence between galaxies, the lattice continued to glow, connecting worlds, species, and memories across the endless dark. And somewhere deep within the earth, beneath the ranch, the pulse beat on, slow, steady, eternal, like the heart of the universe itself. The world after that night was never the same. It wasn't chaos, at least not yet. It was awakening. Governments, scientists, and ordinary people all around the planet began reporting the same phenomenon. Strange lights moving across the skies in synchronized formation compasses, spinning without reason, and deep tones echoing faintly through the ground, the same harmonic pulse that started at Skinwalker Ranch. For most people, it was terrifying. For Aria and Elias, it was a confirmation of everything they had begun to suspect. The universe itself had memory. Over the following days, they worked to decode the residual energy patterns. The readings were unlike anything ever seen, electromagnetic fields wrapped inside gravitational distortions like a cosmic braid of space and time. The energy signature repeated the same mathematical constants again and again, phi, pi, and the speed of light, as if the entire phenomenon were written in the fundamental alphabet of the cosmos. "This isn't just physics," Aria said softly, running her fingers over the glowing graphs. "It's design. It's consciousness turned into mathematics." Elias looked at her. "Then the universe itself might be alive." She smiled faintly. "Maybe it always was. We just learned to listen." They uploaded the data to a private satellite network to compare with global readings. The results were stunning. The harmonic pulse that had begun at the ranch was now circling the Earth in perfectly symmetrical waves, wrapping around the planet like the rings of Saturn. And at certain latitudes, the waves intersected and formed energy nodes identical in shape to the luminous grid they'd seen in the being's vision. "These nodes are reactivating in sequence," Elias explained, "and each time one ignites, local conditions change slightly: magnetism, temperature, even atmospheric composition." Aria leaned closer to the map. "Look at the alignment. It's following orbital resonance with the moon. The grid is syncing not only to Earth, but to the entire Earth-Moon system." Elias froze. "That's impossible. Unless it was designed to," she finished. That night, another event occurred. At exactly midnight, the ranch's instruments detected a pulse from deep beneath the surface, stronger than any before. The ground vibrated like a living thing. The lights above the triangle returned brighter and sharper, forming a spiraling column that pierced the sky. Aria and Elias rushed outside. The light was so bright it turned night into day. Within the column, shadows moved slow, fluid, deliberate. "They're back," Elias whispered. Aria's voice trembled. "No, not back. Closer." As they watched, one of the shadows detached itself and descended. The air around them shimmered, bending light like heat above asphalt. Then from the glow, a figure appeared, humanoid tall, its form composed of threads of luminous energy that wove in and out of visibility. It wasn't just there, it existed halfway between being seen and being felt. When it spoke, its voice wasn't a sound at all, but a pressure inside their minds. The lattice breathes, the seed awakens. Arya felt her knees weaken. Who are you? The being's form rippled like liquid starlight. We are not gods as your ancestors believed. We are echoes of the architects, those who sculpted matter from the vibrations of void. We are memory made visible. Elias stared awestruck. You're the ones who built the Dyson spheres, the network? We maintain the continuity, the voice replied. When one world forgets its purpose, the lattice sends reminders. You call them anomalies, we call them repairs. Arya stepped forward. The harmonic pulse, is it repairing Earth? The being's light dimmed briefly, not repairing, restoring. Your planet's frequency drifted for millennia. Civilization's noise disrupted the symphony, but the pattern has found its tone again. She swallowed. And what happens when the restoration completes? Then Earth will rejoin the network. Communication will open not by machines, but through consciousness itself. Elias's hands trembled. You mean telepathy, a collective mind? Shared awareness, the being said. When a civilization learns to think in harmony, its species becomes a single instrument in the orchestra of creation. The being extended a hand of pure light toward Arya. When she reached out, her fingers passed through it, but she felt warmth, not like heat, but like sunlight felt by the soul. Instantly, her mind filled with images, not words, but sensations. Stars collapsing into black holes, galaxies forming like petals, entire civilizations speaking through light instead of sound. And at the heart of it all, a pulse, the same rhythm she'd heard under the ranch. It was the heartbeat of the cosmos itself. She stumbled back, gasping. It's beautiful, she whispered, and infinite. The being turned toward the sky. Your world has one more cycle to align. When the resonance completes, the veil will lift. You will see what your ancestors saw before fear silenced them. Elias frowned. When your moon sings with your oceans, it said cryptically, when gravity and thought meet at the same frequency. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the being dissolved into a cascade of light. The column faded, leaving the night calm once more. But the change had begun. In the days that followed, scientists across the world observed anomalies that defied explanation. The Earth's magnetic field shifted slightly, aligning perfectly with the solar wind in ways that stabilized the planet's ionosphere. Ozone layers healed faster, polar auroras intensified. Even global temperatures fluctuated in rhythmic harmony, as if the planet's systems were tuning themselves to a cosmic beat. People began reporting vivid dreams, visions of star maps, spiraling fractals, and radiant beings of light. Some claimed they could feel emotions from others more clearly, like empathy had become contagious. Elias summarized it best during one of their late-night talks. Whatever they did, it's rewiring consciousness itself. Humanity is starting to resonate not just with each other, but with the universe. Arya looked out at the stars. Maybe that's what evolution really means, not changing bodies, but expanding awareness. And then she saw it, a faint arc of light stretching across the night sky, faintly glowing like a bridge made of mist. It wasn't a meteor, it was stationary, massive, and pulsing in rhythm with the Earth's hum. Elias followed her gaze. Is that? Yes, she said, a corridor. The bridge they spoke of. For the first time in recorded history, humanity was watching a gateway form between worlds, not of destruction, but of connection. And as the stars shimmered in that silent, perfect rhythm, Arya whispered to the universe itself, maybe this is what they meant by remembering. The cosmos isn't out there, it's in us. Far beyond the ranch, unseen but not unfelt, the lattice pulsed once more, a final heartbeat of confirmation. The Earth was no longer alone. It had begun to sing again. All over the world, the same cosmic pulse resonated, subtle but constant. It wasn't loud or violent. It was soft, like the sound you don't hear with your ears but feel in your bones. It was the heartbeat of a living universe, and Earth had started to beat in time with it again. The planet that began to sing. At first, the world didn't understand. Scientists thought it was magnetic interference or seismic resonance, but then things began to change slowly, beautifully, impossibly. Satellite images show geometric auroras, perfect hexagons and spirals forming above the poles. Oceans began to emit faint blue bioluminescence at night, glowing in rhythm with the cosmic pulse. In hospitals, doctors found that certain patients' brain waves were aligning to the same frequency, 7.8, 3 hertzes, the Schumann resonance, the heartbeat of Earth's atmosphere. It's as if the planet is teaching our nervous systems to tune in, Arya said, reading the data. Elias looked up from the monitor's, eyes wide. And when enough of us sync with it, maybe we'll see what's really here. The sky that opened. One night, while the team monitored the instruments, the stars began to move again, slowly, deliberately, not in chaos, but in pattern. Lines of light formed between them like invisible bridges of energy. Constellations that once seemed random began connecting, linking star to star until they formed something entirely new, a spiral, the same pattern engraved in ancient stones across Earth. Arya whispered, "It's the same symbol from the being, the pattern of creation." Elias adjusted the telescope, focusing on the center of the spiral, and gasped. At its heart was a dark void spinning with faint silver light. It wasn't a black hole, it was a gateway. "Look at the distortion," he said. "It's folding space like fabric, it's..." A wormhole, Arya finished. "They've opened a bridge." The arrival. 3 nights later, the first object appeared. But it wasn't a ship. It had no engines, no metal, no fire. It looked like a sphere of water suspended in midair, translucent, shimmering alive. Inside it, faint silhouettes moved humanoid, yes, but fluid, their bodies made of light and sound. They pulsed like hearts, each beat creating a vibration that made the sand below dance. When Arya approached, the sphere responded. Its surface rippled, and a single beam of light extended toward her forehead. Suddenly, she wasn't standing on Earth anymore. She was floating in a vast ocean of stars, billions of suns swirling like bioluminescent plankton. Between them, immense structures floated, cities of light suspended in cosmic mist. And within her mind, a presence spoke. Not in words, in pure understanding. "You are remembering what you forgot. Your world is one verse in a universal song. We are not gods. We are the bridge between awareness and creation." Arya felt tears well in her eyes. "Why now?" she whispered. "Because your species has reached the frequency of truth. You are learning to see without eyes." When she blinked, she was back at the ranch. The sphere had dissolved into a cloud of golden dust that drifted upward into the stars. The message in the genes. The next discovery came from something unexpected: DNA samples. Researchers across the world found a faint electromagnetic signature embedded in human DNA, a resonant frequency that pulsed in harmony with the cosmic lattice. "It's not random," Elias said. "Our cells are receiving the same signal as the planet. The resonance is biological. It's evolution through frequency." Arya stared at the data, whispering, "Then they didn't just visit us, they built us." She realized what the being had meant. "You are fragments of us." Humanity wasn't a cosmic accident. It was a continuation, a branch of an ancient civilization that had once shaped the stars and then vanished into their own creation. The lattice, the wormholes, the Dyson spheres, they were all remnants of a civilization so advanced that it had learned to merge consciousness with energy itself. And now Earth, their forgotten child, had rejoined the network. The return of memory. Weeks passed. People began to change, not physically, but perceptually. Children saw colors adults couldn't name. Some people reported hearing harmonies in silence. Others dreamt of stars, of places they had never been but could describe in perfect detail. Global scientists were baffled. Religious leaders were divided. But something undeniable had shifted. Humanity was awakening to its cosmic identity. One evening, Arya and Elias stood on the mesa, watching the sky shimmer like liquid glass. Above them, faint rings of light, invisible to most pulsed, slowly forming a vast hexagonal halo around the planet. Elias exhaled, awestruck. The grid is fully active. Arya smiled faintly. "Then the Earth has remembered its song." A soft vibration filled the air, low, warm, peaceful. It wasn't mechanical, it was alive. And then far in the distance, a second planet appeared in the sky, faint, transparent, like a reflection across dimensions. It hovered for just a moment, then faded again as though it were waving across space-time. Elias stared in disbelief. That wasn't a moon, was it? Arya's voice trembled. "No. That was another world on the same frequency. We just touched across realities." the cosmic symphony. That night, the hum grew louder and the auroras danced all the way down to the equator. People across the planet stopped what they were doing. For a brief moment, everyone, every creature, every ocean, every tree vibrated in perfect unison. The planet was singing, and the stars answered back. Aria stood on the mesa wind in her hair, tears streaming down her face. "We were never alone," she whispered. "We were just out of tune." Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "Now we found the key again." High above them, the lattice shimmered vast and invisible, stretching from galaxy to galaxy. Beings of light moved within it like currents in an ocean, guiding the harmonies of creation itself. And as Earth rejoined the cosmic symphony, Aria felt the last veil lift from her mind. She understood. Every atom, every star, every heartbeat, all were verses in one infinite song. And now, humanity was singing once more. After the night, the Earth began to sing. Nothing was the same anymore. The air felt different, charged softer, almost conscious. Even the wind carried a faint hum like a background vibration that seemed to speak in the language of the cosmos. Across the world, scientists struggled to explain what was happening. Satellites were picking up new patterns of radiation that pulsed in Fibonacci sequences, the same mathematical rhythm that governs galaxies, seashells, hurricanes, and DNA spirals. But this wasn't just natural geometry anymore. It was intelligent. The frequency of life. At Skinwalker Ranch, Aria and Elias continued their research in isolation. The hum beneath the ground now came and went in perfect intervals, like a heartbeat. "We're sitting on a transmitter," Elias said, staring at the graphs. "But it's not broadcasting in radio. It's using something deeper, quantum resonance. The planet is literally entangled with distant points in the universe." Aria nodded, eyes fixed on the oscillating data. Every atom on Earth vibrates in connection with others across the cosmos. It's as if reality itself is woven together by invisible threads of sound and light. Elias turned toward her. "You're describing quantum coherence on a planetary scale. That shouldn't even be possible." "It shouldn't," she agreed softly. "And yet it's happening." The rain of light. A few nights later, a strange phenomenon swept the skies of the entire world. It began with streaks of silver falling from the upper atmosphere, not meteors, not satellites, but particles of light. When they touched the ground, they dissolved without heat, leaving behind faint glowing residues. Everywhere, people looked up mesmerized. Children laughed, adults cried. Even the animals stood still, ears twitching toward the sky. "It's not falling debris," Aria said, watching the rain of light cascade across the desert. "It's data. The lattice is transmitting information through photonic particles." Elias captured samples using a vacuum chamber. The particles behaved like nothing they'd ever seen, sometimes solid, sometimes vapor, sometimes vanishing altogether. "They phase in and out of physical reality," he murmured. "It's as if they exist halfway between matter and energy, like thoughts made visible." He looked at Aria, eyes wide. "What if this is how they travel? Not through space, but through vibration. They move as information across the quantum field, and when the conditions are right, they rematerialize." Aria smiled. "That means they never left. They were always here, just invisible to our senses." The eye in the sky. 2 days later, NASA telescopes detected a new anomaly near Jupiter. A vast circular distortion had appeared just beyond the orbit of the gas giant, a faint halo of light-bending gravity itself. Elias watched the feed in disbelief. "That's the same signature as the one over the ranch. It's a mirror portal, a stabilized wormhole." Aria leaned closer. "It's not random. They're building bridges, connecting nodes across the solar system." More anomalies followed: a pulse from beneath the moon's south pole, an energy flare from beneath Antarctica, and faint patterns on Mars resembling Earth's ancient spirals. "Every planet with a magnetic core," Aria whispered, "is part of the network. The lattice isn't just around Earth, it's everywhere." She looked up from the data realization dawning on her face. The entire solar system is waking up, the language of stars. That night, Aria began hearing the hum differently. It wasn't just vibration anymore. It carried tones, harmonics, even faint intervals like the beginning of a melody. She sat outside beneath the stars, recording the frequencies. As she slowed the playback, the tones arranged themselves into chords. Elias joined her, listening intently. "It's structured," he said. "It's not random background noise, it's music." Aria smiled softly. "The universe communicates through resonance. Maybe this is their language, a symphony written in the fabric of space-time." She looked up at the sky, and we're finally hearing the words. The melody shifted again low tones, followed by a single harmonic note that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Aria closed her eyes. In that moment, she understood something without needing translation. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't an invasion. It was a greeting. A voice within the music whispered gentle, infinite, "Welcome back, children of the lattice. The song remembers you." The star map. By morning, a new phenomenon appeared on the ranch. Where the ground had been scorched weeks before, faint patterns of light now glowed under the soil concentric rings connected by thin lines of gold. Elias took aerial scans. "It's a projection," he said. A star map encoded in the Earth's electromagnetic field. As they followed the pattern, it became clear the map didn't just depict our galaxy. It showed multiple galaxies connected by luminous threads. Each thread pulsed with a different frequency, but all harmonized into one cosmic chord. "They're showing us the architecture of the universe," Arya said in awe. "Every galaxy, every star system, every living world, all connected by vibration. It's not random, it's alive." The awakening of mind. Weeks passed and something extraordinary began to happen. Humanity itself started to change. People across the planet reported the same experiences: clearer intuition, heightened empathy, shared dreams, spontaneous understanding of concepts they'd never studied. Musicians wrote songs they couldn't explain. Children spoke of patterns in the air. "Our consciousness is synchronizing," Arya said, studying brainwave scans from around the world. "We're beginning to think as one, a species-level resonance." Elias looked both awed and frightened. "Are we evolving, or are we being guided?" Arya met his gaze. "Maybe both." The cosmic door. And then came the final event. On the night of the equinox, when Earth's day and night were in perfect balance, the entire planet pulsed with light. The auroras spread across every latitude. Oceans shimmered with blue fire. Mountains glowed faintly under starlight. At Skinwalker Ranch, a sphere of light appeared once more, vast, radiant, almost transparent. This time, it wasn't alone. Dozens more appeared across the globe in deserts, jungles, cities, oceans, hovering in silence. Arya felt a warmth flood through her mind. The voice returned calm and kind. "The cycle completes. You are no longer separate. You have remembered your origin light becoming aware of itself." The spheres pulsed, once then rose slowly into the sky, merging with the stars until they became indistinguishable from them. Elias whispered, "They're not leaving, are they?" Arya shook her head, smiling through tears. "No. They're becoming part of us, part of everything." The hum faded into silence. The earth rested. The universe listened. And in that stillness, for the first time in history, humanity understood. The cosmos was not a void. It was a living, breathing being, a vast symphony of consciousness, and we were one of its notes. The earth had fallen silent again, but it was a new kind of silence. Not emptiness, not absence. It was the quiet that comes after a great symphony ends, when the last note still vibrates in the air, too faint for the ear, but alive in the heart. The lattice, that invisible network binding worlds together, had reawakened. The cosmic music had faded, yet its rhythm lingered everywhere, in the pulse of the oceans, in the tremor of mountains, even in the slow heartbeat of human minds, now subtly tuned to the same universal song. Arya and Elias stayed at Skinwalker Ranch, now more like guardians than researchers. Government sent scientists, theologians, even linguists to study the phenomenon, but none could fully explain it. The hum that once scared people had become a comfort, a reminder that the planet was alive. And then one night, something returned. The echo from the void. It started as a shimmer on the horizon, faint silver like heat rising from the desert floor. Arya noticed it first. She grabbed the infrared telescope and gasped. "There's something forming out there," she said, "about 2 kilometers from the triangle." Elias joined her eyes, narrowing at the flickering distortion. The air rippled like water-bending starlight. Then slowly the shape appeared, not a craft, not metal, but geometry made visible. It was a cube of light, rotating in perfect silence. Each face shimmered with fractal symbols, rearranging themselves in patterns too fast to comprehend. "Is that alive?" Elias whispered. Arya could feel it, not with her eyes, but deep inside her chest. A pulse, soft and steady, resonated with her heartbeat. "It's communicating," she said. "Not with sound or radio, with resonance." The cube floated closer, stopping above the ground. From its center, a beam of soft white light extended toward them. And within that light, appeared images, not random ones. Clear, detailed projections of distant worlds, a crimson planet with twin moons, a sea of liquid clouds glowing green, mountains of crystal under two suns. Each world pulsed in rhythm, connected by the same golden thread of energy that bound Earth to the lattice. Elias's voice was barely a whisper. These are other nodes in the network, other civilizations. Arya reached out instinctively, and the cube responded. The symbols on its faces shifted into spirals and circles, then formed words she could feel rather than read. Observation complete. Phase 2 expansion of consciousness. She blinked. Expansion of what? The light dimmed and another image appeared of the human brain glowing faintly with golden veins of light. Around it spun atomic structures, galaxies, and energy waves, all sharing the same shape, a spiral within a spiral. Elias frowned. They're showing us evolution, but not physical, mental. Consciousness expanding until it matches the geometry of the universe. When understanding aligns with creation, the species ascends. The voice continued. You will see beyond matter. You will see through time. The cube pulsed once more and vanished not in a flash, but by unfolding as though space itself had simply let it go. Arya stared at the empty air, trembling. Elias, they're not just observing us, they're teaching us. The mind as a telescope. Over the following days, strange reports flooded in from across the planet. Ordinary people, farmers, teachers, children began having visions. They described the same thing. Spiraling lights, shapes of impossible symmetry, and voices that spoke without sound. But the most remarkable part wasn't the visions, it was what followed. Artists began painting identical symbols, even on opposite sides of the world. Musicians composed melodies that matched the harmonic frequencies of the cosmic lattice. Some physicists, while meditating, wrote down equations they had never studied, complex, yet correct, predicting patterns in quantum fields that no human had ever measured. It's like a collective awakening, Elias said. Humanity's thoughts are starting to synchronize with universal structures. Arya nodded. They said we would see beyond matter. Maybe consciousness itself is the telescope. The mind is learning to look through time. One night, while reviewing the data, Arya closed her eyes and tried an experiment, focusing not on the instruments, but on the hum itself. To her astonishment, the hum answered. Her vision expanded outward, first through the ranch, then beyond the planet. She saw Earth floating in a soft web of light connected by shimmering threads to the moon, to Mars, to the rings of Saturn, and farther still into the depths of interstellar space. Then she saw them, the architects. They were not flesh and blood. They were beings of pure structure woven from the same geometry as galaxies. Their bodies were made of light, but their presence carried immense gravity, bending time around them like ripples around a stone. You are not our creation, they told her. You are our continuation. Every civilization that awakens becomes part of the lattice. Each node adds its voice to the universal chorus. Arya's thoughts trembled. Then what happens to us now? You evolve not through conquest, but through coherence. When your world thinks as one, the veil will fall, and you will see us not as distant gods, but as reflections of what you already are. She opened her eyes, gasping. Elias caught her before she fell. Arya, what happened? She smiled weakly. They showed me the truth. The universe isn't expanding into emptiness, it's growing into awareness. Every galaxy, every life form, every thought is part of the same consciousness learning to know itself. Elias stared at her, stunned. And the lattice, it's the nervous system of existence, she whispered. And we are one of its cells. The merging of worlds. Weeks later, telescopes across the world detected something impossible. The night sky was changing. The distance between certain stars, constant for billions of years, began to shrink. Not physically, but visually, as if space itself was bending inward. Then faintly at first, new stars appeared, ghostly reflections of systems from another dimension overlapping with ours. Astronomers called them mirror constellations. Arya knew better. The veil is thinning, she said. The dimensions are beginning to overlap. Elias adjusted the long-range sensors. We're not just part of one universe anymore. We're touching the others. That night, the sky shimmered like a living painting. Entire constellations pulsed, softly forming spirals that stretched across the heavens. For a moment, just a moment, every human being on Earth looked up and saw a vast, radiant eye made of stars opening across the Milky Way. The hum beneath the earth grew stronger, not menacing, but harmonious like a heartbeat syncing with the pulse of the cosmos. Phase 3, the voice whispered once more in Arya's mind. Union of matter and mind. She looked at Elias, her voice trembling but calm. They're merging realities, bridging thought and physics. We're becoming what they are. The Great Awakening. When dawn came, the sky was different. The sun rose brighter, but its light carried a subtle shimmer, as if space itself had gained a faint transparency. And then humanity began to see. Not with eyes, but with understanding. People could feel the thoughts of others. The separation between minds blurred. For the first time in history, the species thought together billions of human hearts, resonating as one vast field of consciousness. War stopped. Borders dissolved. The old fear of the unknown was replaced by a quiet awe, the realization that everything living, everything glowing in the sky was connected. Arya stood once more at the triangle, eyes full of tears. It's happening, Elias. The lattice is alive in us now. He nodded slowly. And humanity has finally joined the conversation. Above them, the stars pulsed in a rhythm that matched their own heartbeats. The lattice glowed faintly, infinite threads stretching into eternity, connecting not just worlds, but dimensions of thought, emotion, and memory. The architect's final whisper echoed gently through the air. The cosmos is not a place. It is a being dreaming of itself through you. And as the first human dawn of the new era touched the earth, Arya realized that the great secret of the universe was never hidden in the stars, it had always been within. The hum faded into a peaceful resonance, the sound of an entire planet awakening. And in that silence that followed, the stars themselves seemed to smile. The world was awake, not in the way humans once thought awake meant, but truly aware. Every living thing, from the smallest seed in the soil to the farthest satellite in orbit, hummed in harmony with the same pulse. The hum had become the heartbeat of the earth, soft, gentle, eternal. Yet Arya and Elias both knew this was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new chapter 1 that stretched beyond human comprehension. The return of the stars. It began quietly. Astronomers around the world noticed faint distortions appearing at the edges of known space shadows, moving between galaxies as if invisible structures were rearranging themselves in the dark. At first, scientists assumed it was gravitational lensing or dark matter interaction. But the data didn't fit any known model. These aren't distortions, Arya said, studying the patterns on her screen. They're signals, like the fabric of space is vibrating. Elias zoomed in on one of the anomalies. The distortion wasn't random. It repeated a pattern spirals, forming inside larger spirals. The same geometry, he whispered. The same pattern we've seen in everything from atoms to galaxies. Arya nodded. It's the universal constant of creation. Phi the golden ratio, the signature of the architects. But this time the spirals weren't passive. They were moving. In the deep void between galaxies, entire clusters of stars began to shift, aligning themselves into vast geometric formations, triangles, circles, tetrahedrons spanning light years. Elias turned to Arya, his voice shaking. They're reorganizing the cosmos, the bridge between galaxies. Days later, a new light appeared in the sky. At first, it looked like a supernova, but it didn't explode. It pulsed steady and bright, sending waves of energy through the cosmic lattice. NASA's Deep Space Telescopes recorded the phenomenon. The energy waves traveled faster than light-bending time itself. It's like they're opening a channel, Arya said, a cosmic corridor, a bridge between galaxies. Elias stared at the readings. They're folding space. The data showed gravitational fields twisting and reconnecting like threads being woven by unseen hands. Stars that had once been millions of light years apart now resonated as if they were touching. They're uniting the galactic nodes, Arya murmured. Each civilization that ever reached awareness is being connected again. And then she realized something. The hum beneath the earth had changed pitch. It was harmonizing with the new pulse from the distant galaxy. Our planet is syncing with them, she whispered. The lattice isn't just connecting space, it's linking minds across the universe. The visitors of light, the night the bridge stabilized, the world saw them. At first they appeared as streaks of blue and gold across the upper atmosphere, like comets moving too slowly to be natural. Then they stopped suspended above the clouds. Dozens of glowing forms descended, not ships, not machines, but luminous entities shaped like flowing geometry. Each one radiated warmth rather than fear. From every continent, people saw them in deserts, mountains, cities, oceans. They didn't speak, they sang. Their voices were not sound, but resonance waves that entered the body and made the heart vibrate with peace. No words were needed. Every human could understand their message. You are not visitors in this universe. You are its memory made flesh. Your evolution is not survival. It is remembrance. Arya stood outside, the command tent, tears in her eyes. One of the beings drifted toward her, its form shifting between light and transparency. She felt it in her mind, gentle, endless. "Why show yourselves now?" she whispered. The being's light flickered softly. "Because your world has remembered the song, and the song cannot exist without every note." Arya felt a sudden clarity, a realization deeper than thought. The universe wasn't infinite emptiness. It was alive, conscious, and connected. Every star, every planet, every atom was a single note in a vast cosmic orchestra, and now humanity had finally joined the performance. The science of the soul. As the days passed, scientists began analyzing the phenomenon with new eyes. Astrophysicists found that quantum particles on Earth were suddenly behaving differently, showing long-range entanglement with particles across vast distances of space. Information traveled faster than light, not as data, but as coherence. Dr. Chen from the European Space Observatory called it the awakening of quantum consciousness. "It's as if the laws of physics are evolving," he explained. "Space isn't empty anymore, it's full of intelligence. Every particle knows what every other particle is doing." Arya smiled when she heard this report. "It's not new," she told Elias. "It's always been like that. We just never had the awareness to notice." Elias nodded slowly. And that's what the architects were waiting for. Not for us to invent new machines, but to remember that the universe is already connected inside our minds. The last message. One evening, as Arya meditated beneath the glowing sky, the hum deepened again. The Earth's vibration slowed into a deep harmonic tone. And from within that sound, a final voice emerged, vast, ancient, but filled with love. "The universe has no edge. It folds upon itself endlessly. The beginning and the end are one breath. When a species remembers its origin, time dissolves. You are not after us. You are us," continued. She opened her eyes to see a vision not of destruction, but transformation. The lattice now spanned galaxies glowing like a neural network of cosmic thought. Planets pulsed like neurons, stars like synapses firing with the energy of life itself. She understood then what the architects truly were. Not aliens in the traditional sense, but evolved consciousness that had transcended physical form. They were the future states of intelligent life. And humanity, in its awakening, was their next echo. The Great Merging. In the years that followed, humans no longer saw themselves as separate beings. Technology and consciousness fused. Machines became extensions of thought. Cities became living ecosystems that breathed and adapted like organisms. People could sense energy not mystically, but scientifically. They learned to harness zero-point energy directly from the quantum field. Travel between planets became travel between vibrations, not by engines, but by tuning consciousness to the correct frequency. Arya called it the science of harmony. She stood once more at the mesa of Skinwalker Ranch, now a sacred place where scientists, philosophers, and artists gathered to study the lattice. Above, the stars shimmered like living eyes. Elias joined her, older now, but smiling. "We used to look up and wonder if we were alone," he said softly. "Now we look up and remember that we never were." Arya smiled. "We've stopped exploring the universe outside. We've started exploring the one within." They stood in silence listening. And faintly carried by the wind came the song, the hum that began it all. It was softer now, woven into the heartbeat of the earth, into the pulse of every living being. A final whisper echoed through their minds, the voice of the architects, and perhaps the universe itself. The cosmos does not end. It awakens. And through you, it dreams itself alive again.